Hi, and welcome to Genre Chat. I'm Cherrilynn Bisbano. Have you ever wanted to learn how to write for magazines and don't know where to start? What about freelance? As writers, we know that money doesn't come easy, but you can make money in freelance and magazine article writing. And our guest today is one of the best in this genre. His name is Terry Whalin. Terry, welcome, and tell us about yourself. How did you get into writing?
Oh, thanks, Cherrilynn. Great to be with you today. I actually majored in journalism in college at Indiana University, one of the top journalism schools in the country. But I sort of took a left-hand turn out of college and went into linguistics for 10 years with Wycliffe Bible Translators. I spent 17 years with them. And back in college, I took a magazine writing class, and we had to write magazine articles. And I wrote really strange magazine articles looking back at that, Cherrilynn. I wrote a Christian view of vegetarianism. I wrote about gays and God. And I thought that, Christianity Today should publish my article about gays and God. I just got rejected from that. I had no idea what in the world I was doing. So during my time at Wycliffe Bible Translators, I was the magazine editor of our little magazine that went out to about 300,000 people back then. But it was really back then. But through that experience, I worked with my colleague, Larry Clark, and really learned how to approach magazines. How do you write a query letter? How do you make a pitch? How do you get your magazine articles out there? And so it was back then that I really started writing for magazines. And, this is years ago, because at this point in my life, I've written for more than 50 magazines. I've written more than 60 books. I'm still writing for magazines, even years later here. So, it's a consistent part of what I do. I'm very active in the American Society of Journalists and Authors. It's the leading nonfiction writers group in the country. It used to be called the Society of Magazine Writers. And so my colleagues at the American Society of Journalists and Authors, they write for all the different top magazines. You name the magazine, they can write for them. So I have people like that are friends of mine, that I can reach out to. If I want to write for Newsweek or the Smithsonian or Woman's Day, you name the magazine, I have somebody that's a friend of mine that I can reach out to help me be able to do that. I don't really want to do that right now for those particular magazines, but that's the level of expertise that we have at the American Society of Journalists and Authors.
That's very impressive, Terry. I didn't know that about you in Wycliffe Bible. What did you translate? And if so, what language did you translate?
Yeah, I did. I actually worked in the Southwest Cachiquel language. It's about 2 hours outside of Guatemala City. There are 28 minority languages in Guatemala, Central America. And so I worked there for several years. Actually started the New Testament with them. It was actually finished in 1993, but it was almost like my previous life. The kinds of things that I was involved in back then.
Now, speaking of other languages, are any of your books? Give us a name. Name some of your books that you have written, and are any of them in another language?
Yeah, they are. I've written, like I say, my first book was a little children's book that I did for David C. Cook years ago, called When I Grow Up, I Can Go Anywhere for Jesus. And that book is in other languages. I think it's in Dutch, and it's long out of print, that particular little children's book. I did a book, my first co-authored book. I've done more than a dozen of those kind of books. And my first one was with Chris Weir, and it was really about the Shining Path, one of the most brutal terrorist groups in this hemisphere down in South America. It's called One Bright Shining Path, Faith in the Midst of Terrorism.
Wow.
And it was in print for a long time from Crossway Books. It's out of print now, but that book was also done in Spanish. It's called Ayacucho para Cristo. And so some of my books have been in other languages and that kind of thing. But yeah, it's, I've written a lot of stuff over the years. I wrote a diet book over 20 years ago that's sold over 100,000 copies. It's called First Place. It came out of First Baptist Houston, and lots of people have used that book.
I've used that book. I've used that book. I wrote that book. Wonderful.
That's a book that I wrote in 11 days, 48,000 words in 11 days. So it was kind of crazy, but yeah.
You seem to be ahead of your time in your writing. Seriously. I mean, back then, even 15, 20 years ago, writing stuff about God and gays and terrorists and things like that, 20 years ago, that stuff was not on the lips of the average American like it is today. So
it's just kind of where I was. So
yeah. Now I want to ask you, we kind of know why you chose magazine article writing. You kind of fell into it. Can you explain more about that? And what is your greatest lesson that you've learned as you've been writing for magazines?
I chose magazine article writing to write for A3 basically because I've done so much of it over the years. After I left Wycliffe, I went to Decision Magazine with Billy Graham, and back then we were doing 1.8 million copies of the magazine every month. It's still a pretty big magazine. I mean, the magazine's around 300,000 now, but I was associate editor of that magazine for a couple of years, and you can imagine working on the inside of a magazine like that. I learned a great deal, and some of the broadest feedback that I've ever gotten from my own magazine work is from like an article that was in Decision that reached millions of people out there doing that. So magazine writing is a great way for every writer to sort of get started, even if you're just beginning. The Christian magazines, particularly, you may not get paid a whole lot, but there's huge amounts of exposure that you get from that. I mean, I've been in book publishing now for years, but if a book sells 5,000 copies in the lifetime of the book, that's a big deal. But a magazine article, it's very common to reach 100,000, 200,000, 500,000 people with your magazine article. So the reach and the fact that you can get out there and touch that many lives with what you're doing is fantastic. So, for example, in my last column for the A3, I wrote about the Upper Room, the little devotional there. I mean, that's like 250 words that you write, but it reaches over 6 million people. I mean, that's an incredible thing. And so magazine writing is great in a number of different ways because it's short, it's to the point. You can learn some key things like how do you write for a target audience? How do you write what the reader is really expecting? And how do you start with a bang? How do you finish with a single point? All those kinds of things you can learn on the short form of writing as opposed to working with a 50, 100,000 word book. I mean, that's a bigger effort to do that kind of thing. And so also magazine articles get published quicker. So you can get published in, 6 or 8 weeks as opposed to, several years to get your book out there. And you learn a whole lot about the writing process, just working on the shorter form is part of the reason that I still like it, and I'm still writing for magazines today even. So I think there's lots of opportunity. Every editor starts with a totally blank slate. So you have to look at the publications and see how frequently they are. I mean, the most frequent ones are like Sunday school take-home papers because they're every week. That editor needs something every single week to put into that publication. A quarterly, 4 times a year would be less material that they need, or a monthly magazine. So there's lots of opportunity out there for freelance writers as part of the way I look at it.
And you have a lot of information at almostanauthor.com underneath your freelance and magazine writing articles. But if I were to come to you and say, how do I get started? Can you give me the steps? I'm new to writing, never done magazine articles. What are the top four or five things that I need to do?
Yeah, that's really a great question. To get started in magazine writing, one of the things you need to do is, first of all, read the publication. Whether you get it on the newsstand, whether you read it online, however, and every single magazine has guidelines. So look at those guidelines online, because that's really where the editor is telling you what they want. And so, I mean, people wonder how in the world I've written all this stuff that I've written, Cherrilynn, over the years. And I tell people it's pretty simple. I go to conferences, I correspond with writers and editors, and they tell me what they want, and then I basically write it and send it to them. So that's the key, is writing what the editor is expecting, not sending a story about washing your dog to a magazine that has no interest in that at all. So you have to deliver to them what they want is one of the keys. And they're giving you that information, what they want, because it's in their guidelines. So look at it. So if they're asking for 500 words on how-to kind of article, give them 500 words. You don't give them 800 words or 1,000 words. You give them what they want. So if you do that over and over consistently, you're gonna find a place for your writing. Now publications are all different. Some of them pay on publication. We used to pay on publication at Billy Graham, so I understand how that works. We would hold your article for months at a time, and then we would finally publish it, and then we paid on publication, and we paid like $25 or something minimal, for that. But other publications pay on acceptance. So in other words, those are better markets for you to write for, because then the magazine takes all the risk. Now they may pay you $200, $300, whatever it is, but if they hold it 6 months before they publish it, so be it, because you've already gotten paid and you're all set. So those are all little variables that are important when you figure out, where you want to write and what the opportunities are.
Now, do you think a new writer should write for free? And if so, for how long?
You have to figure out if you're going to, that's a good question about writing for free. I guess part of the question, if you're going to write for free, is, what's the exposure level? What's the advantage to you? Are you going to get published out there? Is it only online? Is it in print? Magazines that are in print in general have a higher standard, and there's greater credibility for you as a writer if you're published in those print publications. So, of the magazines that I've written for, over 50 of them, there's a high failure rate in magazines. So a number of those publications don't even exist anymore. So like I wrote for Christian Parenting Today and Today's Christian Woman and Eternity. Those magazines don't even exist anymore. It's a constantly changing environment. But yeah, absolutely. Writers can learn a lot writing for free. One of the resources that I recommend people get is they get this Christian Writers Market Guide. Get the current one, because it has over 200 periodicals that are in there. There's the editor's contact information, their guidelines, what kind of things they're looking for. Get yourself educated, first of all, probably as far as those kinds of details, and then just get started and do it and try it and see what happens. Some publications want the full manuscript. Some want what they call a query letter, which is a one-page pitch letter where you pitch your idea, and then they see if they want the full manuscript or not.
That's wonderful. When I was a new writer, I didn't even know what a query letter was. I didn't even know how to pronounce it. So
right.
I'm learning a lot, and you have a book and on how to write book proposals, query letters, things like that. Do you have a book about magazine?
I do not have a book about magazine, but I have an article that I wrote about the whole basic way of writing a magazine article, and that's at terrylinks.com/basic.
Can you say that again?
terrylinks, plural.com/basic. And that'll pull up an article that's over on my writewriting.com site, but it gives the whole scoop about how do you find ideas and write query letters and all that kind of stuff.
Do you recommend any books for writing query letters or freelancing magazine articles? What books would you recommend? Other books would you recommend?
Oh, there's lots of books. So, I guess I wasn't really thinking about magazine articles particularly, but there's, Writer's Digest has a lot of great magazine articles. Just go to your public library and look under the writing books. I'm sure there's lots of great ones. They come out all the time. And even the older ones are good because they have a lot of real sound advice that's in those books.
Wonderful. Now, if I have a great article, say like I have a great Christmas article, and I know it's within their submission guidelines and stuff, do I send it in November?
It's a great question. No, typically magazines like that for seasonal articles are working at least 3, 4, maybe even 6 months ahead of time. So, typically in July is when we would be working on Christmas stuff. So we'd be playing Christmas music in the magazine and all that kind of stuff. Get in the right kind of mood.
That's where Christmas in July came from.
Yeah, but what you need to do is think about those seasonal articles. That's a great tip because every publication is looking for that. So like, when February rolls around, every editor is looking for love articles related to Valentine's Day or, something patriotic related to Memorial Day or Veterans Day, those things. So the other big magazine hint that I would give you is many of these publications use what they call personal experience articles. So they're first person articles. And all of us have personal experiences of something, something goes wrong and we learn something from it or whatever. So what I encourage people to do is they have these experiences, maybe it's a holiday or whatever kind of experience, write that up and then use that as a possible magazine article.
Wonderful. Now, I know that sometimes magazines, like you can go online and look at their submission guidelines. They might not have exactly what they're looking for. Can you query the editor and say, may I have a list of what you were planning on writing for the next year? Would they give that to you?
It depends on the publication, but yeah, that's a good idea too. Those are called theme lists, and magazines do have they have a theme list. So they'll sit down and they'll say, okay, in August we're going to publish this, and in September we're going to publish this, and they'll publish that like a year in advance. And part of the reason they do that is because they want you as a writer to be thinking about that and send them ideas. So if you have looked for their theme list and know that they want something, you're going to be much more attractive to them than all the massive other stuff that they'll get.
So if I write, send them an article, everything's the submission and guidelines and everything's right, and I get a rejection letter back, should I try again?
Yeah, sure. Depends on what kind of rejection you get. I mean, most of us in the publishing world just send sort of plain generic rejection letters. It didn't fit. Sorry, thanks, but no thanks. This is not right for us. That kind of thing. But if you get a little personal note from the editor at the bottom or anything at all that encourages you, definitely try again and keep on pitching. That's one of the keys, is not to give up and keep looking for the right place for you. And there's lots of opportunity out there.
So we have about 5 minutes left. This goes by so fast, Terry. I want to tell people, Terry is a wealth of knowledge and information. He also, you can find a lot of his information at almostanauthor.com. And under genre, do you hear that noise? There's a weird noise. But sorry about that. And you can learn a lot about magazine and freelance. But Terry doesn't do just that. Terry, do you want to tell them about your other job with Morgan James?
My main job these days is I'm an acquisitions editor at Morgan James Publishing. We're a New York-based publishing house. I live in Colorado, but I work remote for them. And we're doing somewhere between 150 and 200 books a year. Only probably 25 or 30 of those books are Christian books, but we're doing a lot of nonfiction. We're doing fiction. We're doing some children's books. So I'm one of the acquisitions editors at the company. I'm not the only one, but I'm always looking for books that we can publish. Yeah. So our publication board at Morgan James meets every week. So I'm sending contracts to authors every single week. Unlike some of these publishing houses, I've worked at 2 other publishers and they only met once a month. So I'm actively looking for great books to publish. Absolutely.
Wonderful. Now, do you have any parting words of wisdom for people who want to get into magazine article writing? And also give us your contact information again, especially the terrylinks.com / book.
Basic. Yeah, I guess, my parting words of wisdom for you about magazine writing would be just to keep at it. And, the things that you read will be triggers for stuff that you'll want to write about. So just kind of be sensitive to that and be looking for those opportunities out there, because there's lots of opportunities. I do have a lot of information that's online. People can, my blog, for example, about the writing life, that's at www.thewritinglife.ws. My blog has almost 1,400 over 1,400 entries that's in that. I have a site called writing.com, RIGHT-writing.com. Has a lot of information over there. My Twitter, under my name, Terry Whalin, has my email address, all that kind of thing. In a world, Cherrilynn, where a lot of times you write these editors and your agents and you feel like your stuff goes in a black hole somewhere, I try to be on the opposite end of the scales and really do answer my email and my phone and try to help as many people as I can out there and help them get connected to the information that they need to get connected to. So that's part of the different way that I operate in the market. And I know that, it all comes back to you. The more people you help, the more that you'll be helped and the greater you'll succeed out there. I do encourage, if you're interested in books, to get a hold of my book proposals that sell book, 21 Secrets to Speed Your Success. This book has over 150 five-star reviews on Amazon, but don't get it from Amazon. Get it from bookproposalsthatsell.com is the best place to do that. And just encourage people to keep at it.
I have that book. I really enjoyed that book. I used your book, The Book Proposals That Sell, for my book proposal.
That's fantastic.
But it is. Terry, I want to thank you so much. You are a wealth of information. I want to thank you for coming on Genre Chat. And please, all of his links should be at almostanauthor.com under his column for marketing, for freelance and magazine. Thank you, and join us next week for Genre